Good afternoon. Welcome everybody at this session. I'm pleased to introduce you on a specific topic on electrification. And yeah, we see the uptake of electrification on different parts. We have been focusing a lot on passenger fleets, but there is also the next level. And we really want to hear from the speakers on this. So I'm really happy and looking forward to introduce you. First of all, Mr. Adam Ridgway from Moto. Welcome. Mr. Nipin Gopi, Sustainable Lead of LeasePlan. Mr. Jelani Aliyu from the Nigerian Automotive Development Council. And I think we have online Mr. Michael Jizhar from MODENA. And there he is, indeed, online. So, to kick off the session, I think it's most ideal to get to know you, who you are, who you represent. So, let's start with Adam.
Please. So yeah, I run a company called Moto, based in the UAE. We've, over the past 2 years, we've expanded into 21 territories, 8 countries, and we design and build the highest performing electric vehicles for the last mile. And we're predominantly focused on motorbikes, delivery vans, and with the countries and expansion plan, we're looking to be in 100 cities. We address 3 problems: the environment, of course, but actually put tangible fact to that, as well as the profitability and time and safety of all last mile or the gig economy. That's us.
Thank you. Nimi, you're next.
Hi, my name is Nipin Gopi. So I don a couple of hats at this company called LeasePlan. I'm the sustainability lead and also commercial account manager there. So LeasePlan is a Dutch-based leasing company. It was established in 1963 and we service 32 countries. Here in the UAE, we are in a joint venture with MODENA. So what we essentially do is we give vehicles on lease to both corporates and private individuals. While we're here, we like to be at the forefront of the whole electrification journey. We want to ensure that people have access to electric cars as soon as possible. Here in the UAE, it's a bit slow compared to the rest of the world, but we're trying to advocate the movement towards electric cars. So that's me and us in a nutshell.
Thank you. Our next speaker, Jelani.
Yes. Good afternoon. I head the government agency in Nigeria, the National Automotive Design and Development Council, and we have the core responsibility of developing the local automotive sector in that country. And our focus now is heavily on vehicle electrification. It's a very new journey for us. We're not here to wow with technology, but we're here to understand potential partners and collaborators that can help us develop that local EV industry in the country.
Thank you. And online, Michael.
Hi everyone. So I'm joining you here from halfway across the world, maybe not halfway. I'm in Asia right now, in Indonesia. And a little bit about MODENA. We are a global brand. We do home appliances, we do renewable energy, we do batteries. We're developing our own electric vehicle at the moment, and we are also doing electric vehicle conversion kit as well. So we today are exporting to over 92 countries across the globe. And in the UAE, and in particular to UAE, Bahrain, Oman, and Qatar, we are working closely with Al Futtaim as our joint partner in the Middle East.
So let's kick off this session with maybe an important question. We've seen now already more than 10 years that electric vehicles are on the market. We have to thanks to the development of the lithium battery, of course. We are now more than 10 years further that the first Nissan Leaf came, the Tesla came on board. How do you experience the consumer perception on e-mobility today? I can maybe address the first question to you. I'm representing LeasePlan. definitely working with the business owners or business market. So what's your perception on this?
Right. Especially GCC, I mean, it's not the same as the rest of the world because the range is greater, people prefer SUVs, the culture is more towards the SUV side, and of course the fact that the charging infrastructure hasn't really caught on, it's been slow. Having said that, around 8% of our fleet today here in the UAE is sustainable, which is a mix of both hybrids and EVs, so it's a stepping stone. Also, the number of chargers have grown dramatically over the past couple of years. I mean, if you take Abu Dhabi, for instance, it probably had less than a dozen. Now it has probably more than 200, 300 chargers. So range anxiety is a chief cause of concern for our consumers, especially when they have to travel to the Northern Emirates where you don't have so many chargers. But it's getting there. There's a lot of interest now. Back then it used to be just Teslas, but now you have a whole range of EVs coming to the market. We have GM coming out with more than 30 models by the end of the year. So there's a lot of interest from consumers right now. So for every 10 cars we probably quote, 2 or 3 are EVs. So there's a lot of interest.
For you?
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I don't think I'm going to say anything that's going to sort of radicalize your mindset, but it's a combination of the charging infrastructure, which we've heard many talks about, and we can have a chat about that all day long. You've got that. It's the different stakeholders. Is it a public responsibility or the government responsibility to invest? Is it the landlords? How do you attract that uptake? Then it's to do the OEMs and manufacturers. When are those vehicles going to be arriving? So you've got that supply chain issue. You've got from a customer's mindset, from our perspective and the conversations that we've had, there's many people that want to make that switch. The education over the past few years has been compounded with fact, with sort of proof of concept, market presence, the big branding, the awareness, and that very vocal commitment from OEMs and manufacturers. So I think that's there. It's gone from a want to a need. That's where that transition sits right now. And I don't think we're quite there. Otherwise, we'd have more. But then if everyone did switch, what does that infrastructure look like? And then I suppose the reason here, how can you pay for it? Because EVs are technically more, on a CapEx model, they are more expensive, but the technology that goes into it. So the average person, do you have X hundreds of thousands of dirhams or whichever currency to go and buy a vehicle, which we know is a depreciating asset, therefore it's a technically bad investment? Or do we find ways that we can make those vehicles affordable and still aspirational, but affordable for absolutely everyone? And that comes down to the individual companies. There's a lot of stakeholders involved in order to make that transition, but it's also a transition. It's not a flick the switch and it happens.
Of course. Michael, your point of view on this, what do you experience?
So I think if you look at the Middle East, of course, there's like the GCC countries in which cars are relatively affordable. So of course, that switch, when you're talking about taking your old car and switching it to a new electric vehicle, is possible. Of course, as mentioned, there's a lot of challenges as far as charging stations are concerned. I think the ownership model may change in the future because you may not need to just see EV as a car itself, but you can also see that your old car can be converted. And this could be relevant for a lot of countries in the Middle East, like Egypt, for example, where there's a big population, but to buy a car, maybe it has 300, 400% taxes for luxury tax. That makes people not able to acquire or have ownership over a vehicle, especially an electric vehicle, a new vehicle. So if you are changing your old car or old bus or old trucks, for the purpose of commercial, and you're able to convert that, this could be one viable, very, very viable solution for the developing markets. And at the same time, I think we can also consider about swappable battery technology. I think swappable battery technology is still something that is ongoing as far as development is concerned in our industry. But I think going forward to the future, because charging takes a long time. Well, the fastest we can do with our charger, for example, you could do around 45 minutes. And this is the fastest we could do from 0 to 100. So I think in the future, if people have a big sense of urgency, this battery switch technology would be something that would be disruptive for our industry.
Then we come to our last speaker in line. How do people in Nigeria perceive the electrification of transport?
Yes, let me begin by touching on the really big picture for Africa,
Yeah.
Nigeria and Africa. Why is vehicle electrification important for this region? I personally believe that vehicle electrification in Africa is actually more important than in any other part of the world. Why do I say this? We're looking at over 1 billion people where transportation and industrialization has huge deficits. So we currently have new governments that are really interested in industrialization and mobilizing the populace. But this cannot be done traditionally with ICE engines and other non-renewable powered transportation. That is why it is crucial that Africa adopts and uses vehicle electrification so that this development taken across the continent is sustainable. When you look at the population of Africa, over 50% of that population lives in remote areas. So vehicle electrification, in addition to, yes, serving the cities and towns, has to be able to integrate into the culture and terrain of the countryside. Therein comes in a business model, ownership model that has to be unique to that type of culture and economic activity. So we as government, NADDC in Nigeria, we're looking at developing EVs to be applicable not just in the cities, but in the remote areas where you have extreme conditions of geography, terrain, climate, heat. So the ownership model has to take into account the low purchasing power of the average Nigerian, and yet provide a solution that is uncompromised. So that is what we're working towards. And like I said, we're really very excited about connecting with individuals and companies with technologies that can really allow us to make this difference and add that value to the average Nigerian and African.
Exciting and promising as well. So I really encourage the goal that you have set. Now, in the world of transport, if you look at passenger cars, also in other in bigger fleet organizations, it's pretty dominated by bigger players, bigger car makers. Also on the side of the oil producers, it's a dominant market. How you see yourself developing in this? We know it's going to be very disruptive. That's already going on. We see also new links made to the renewable energy. How do you see your product placed in this dominated market? You can go.
Okay.
As first, yes.
Thank you. So yeah, we design and build in a very modular form, and we've done that because we've learned from the sort of the grandeurs of vision and success, and maybe some overlooked parts of, say, the EV transition, and the innovation of it. So we look at modularizing our manufacturing process with the vehicles, also with the management of the business. Our entire company is based on innovating using technology as opposed to innovating tech. We leave that to the bigger players, which then allows us to keep our price point low, the affordability, the convenience, the experience very high. So that's what we're focused on, and we're also focused on a very specific niche. But what that does allow us to do is, with the example with Nigeria, fastest growing population globally, and it's looked to achieve, I can't remember the date, but it will be the fastest growing. And Africa as a whole, sort of 54 countries of Africa, they've said, I think a couple of years ago, stop using us as your dumping ground for the second-hand sort of mobility market, which even here, after a vehicle's lifespan, it gets sold to Africa because it's a price-sensitive sort of purchasing power, I suppose. So we are looking, and we work with various different stakeholders internationally to build local assembly and then manufacturing facilities, increasing the workforce, manpower, employment. And as a company, we achieve 15 out of 17 United Nations SDGs as of today. So from that perspective, we see innovation, collaborations incredibly important to the success of transition.
Really good key messages, sustainable driven, innovating driven, but also, yeah, to making that position possible. How do you experience that in Nigeria? Because I don't think, I assume it's not an easy task, but you can maybe convince us that it's going on?
Yes, it's not easy because the automotive sector, compared to other parts of the world, is relatively new. You have companies like GM that are over 100 years old in the US. So we're just starting. But we're very happy and excited that we do have commitment both from within and without Nigeria of companies coming in to set up automotive production and assembly. So like I mentioned earlier, this is a time for us to really identify potential players in the EV game that can come into Nigeria, work with us, identify the best mousetrap in terms of EV that will be most applicable for Nigeria, co-develop it to be most applicable there, and then go into production. The extremes of Nigeria and Africa actually provide such a challenge that we believe if a vehicle works or a system works in Africa, it will be easy to apply it in other parts of the world. So we're really open and very excited and ready to discuss with potential innovation developers to really add value in the EV sector in Nigeria.
And I will bring the same question to Michael here online.
I think as far as EV is concerned, I know that there's a lot of push on the sustainability development goals of the United Nations. We have to make sure that all of the process is definitely sustainable. So for example, nowadays in Indonesia, there are more and more car companies like Hyundai and Tesla, just to name a few, are possibly coming in to set up their factories outside of just us. And because there's a lot of nickel that is used for the battery. But sometimes what people don't realize is when the nickel is being mined, they're doing the nickel mining in an unsustainable way in order to create a finished product that is supposedly saving the earth. So we have to make sure that the mining of the nickel is done sustainably, so that we're definitely reaching, we're not counterproductive. We're not showing ourselves to be, trying to be sustainable, but in the end, we're being counterproductive. That's the first thing. And the second thing I think is, if you look at countries like the UAE, it is, perhaps it is easy. It's easier for people to accept EV because going from one place to another is not so far away. But let's say if you look at a country like Indonesia, like the Philippines, for example, like Thailand as well, maybe more so towards Indonesia and the Philippines, there are 17,000 islands. And there are lots of parts of Indonesia that's still remote. It makes the shift very difficult. So I think even as we're living in the 4th largest population in the world, these are really big challenges that we really must consider to tackle in order to make the transition much more smooth.
So Nipin, we hear initiatives. Do you think that you can bring the products towards LeasePlan, coming from Nigeria, coming from the colleagues here around the table? Do you see that it's an easy task to bring these products in the portfolio of LeasePlan?
But before I answer that question, I mean, just to continue what Michael was talking about, because it was a really interesting one to delve into, because having an EV is not necessarily being sustainable. At LeasePlan, we're part of the Circular Car initiative, and here what I really like about the UAE government is that they're at the forefront of this whole circularity concept. It's not just being sustainable. How do you make the whole thing circular? How do you close the loop? So you can talk about batteries, you can talk about cars, you talk about ICE vehicles, it has over 30,000 moving parts. What happens to it once a car is done? I mean, yes, you use it to tertiary markets, you can sell it on, but then what happens? It probably ends up in a scrapyard. And the same thing with a battery. I mean, does it have a first life, second life, third life, and so on? So we're working closely with the government in this regard to see how we can make, how we can take circularity, get circularity into this region and not just focus on EVs. It's great, it reduces carbon emission, but then you also want to maximize, and that's where the ownership models also come into play, where you have shared mobility, whereby you increase capacity, we have more passengers going in less number of vehicles. And that's where EVs can play a role, just not having ICE vehicles as part of the shared mobility. You can have EVs helping in the last mile in ensuring that more people are using less number of vehicles. Yeah.
Actually, part of my next question, but
okay.
But that's fair enough.
But going into the kind of brands that we can possibly work with, we're not brand specific at LeasePlan. We're more than happy to work with new brands. But the fact is, the leasing model as such, it's pretty straightforward. I mean, you have a buying price and you have a resale value. You predict the resale value. So if it's a brand new product, you don't have data on what could potentially be the resale value 3 years from now or 4 years from now. And also the depreciation, because EVs are not so popular, they tend to depreciate more than your regular ICE vehicles. So even with the cost coming down, say we've done a recent study in Europe, and the costs are almost the same for EVs and ICE. But if the depreciation is high, then the lease rate would be higher. But what leasing helps potential customers, that they can make the switch far easier. I mean, they don't have to put all the cash up front. You always have a choice of testing waters by paying a monthly installment for the next 3 years. So yeah, that's.
Now I can pick up on your topic that you actually introduced. So what I see coming from a European organization is also that the transport modes are shifting away. Your displacement from going from point A to B is not anymore dedicated just to 100% taking your car and your own car. So what shift do you see the shift also happening here? And maybe to the other speakers here also, which products, are you bringing products that support this?
Right. I mean, the talks are going on. I mean, integrated mobility is the biggest thing. So you do have smart neighborhoods. I mean, you have Masdar, you have, in the Dubai Sustainable City. I mean, you have these kind of neighborhoods, which are your 20-minute neighborhoods. I mean, that is where we are headed. Your last mile solutions play a big role. How do you ensure that a person travels from A to B, seamlessly, using a single transport access? Through multiple transportation modes. I mean, these are the kind of conversations that we are having with the government. So we want to be part of it. We have products that would fit that kind of. We work with shared mobility providers like eCar, UDrive. These are startups which focus on shared cars subscription model. So we lease cars to them, and they use it for their customers. So yeah, that's how we play a role here.
Adam, I see your product.
I do have a point on this. So I believe the two words are collaboration and convenience. So when I set up or had the idea of the opportunity with One Moto back in 2016, I saw that with the likes of Talabat, which is a delivery service, coming from Kuwait, getting bought out, and then there was this sort of uplift of everyone wants to get something delivered, and Carfu, who deliver petrol. It was that was the catalyst of, in this country, we will have everything delivered at our convenience. So, and then we started doing more and more research, and then that research went regional, then international, then we published a white paper to really look at what it would take to make that switch, and how us as a population, whichever sort of footprint we have, how does that look in terms of mobility? So yes, shared mobility is definitely a player. When you look at the public transport systems in, again, any country, that has a play. The the leasing, the ownership, that we will have anything delivered. So you've got the last mile. So it's absolute collaboration from absolutely every stakeholder within mobility. And like for us, we've got customers that are talking about CapEx of a large volume of fleet, and then there's others that are just looking at OpEx. So again, that ownership model, you need to be very, very flexible, not just with the vehicles, but also with the batteries. So we've got a battery as a service model, which then takes the cost of the CapEx away from the EV to then an OpEx model of operation and running those vehicles in each country that we operate, especially the price-sensitive countries where battery as a service is going to be more prominent than, say, more affluent countries. So it's collaboration and making sure that mobility is convenient.
I also want to add a point to what Adam had just said about collaboration. I think collaboration doesn't only need to happen at the last chain, at the B2C chain, where we're going direct to the customers, but even at the producer level. I see that in the future, the traditional current ICE players of brands, there's a lot of them that will not make it big in the EV industry, because it really works differently. For example, I'm just giving one example of one industry that we're also in is in the home appliances industry. There's a lot of consolidation that happens. There's also a lot of people who are not manufacturing everything that they're making. So for example, if you're talking about, if you're making, let's say, one brand, sometimes certain brands are buying from other manufacturers. So I think this could also be the case with EV. There could be that perhaps cars are coming out of the same factory under different designs, kind of like how Apple is buying from Foxconn. I think this model of contract manufacturing and collaboration to create a bigger volume, to push down further the cost of production, plus also making the technological advancement faster as well. I think that's also equally important. So collaboration in the sense of B2C, collaboration in the sense of B2B is equally important in this transformation.
Jelani, do you also think in the same direction, or do you see a different perspective in your country?
There are similarities and then some very exciting differences also. The ownership model and the types of vehicles that would be applicable in most Nigerian cities and in other African cities and bigger towns would generally be similar to what you would need in bigger communities around the world. What is really unique and exciting is when you go out of those bigger cities into the countryside, there are certain economic and social activities that are endemic to those places that need to be maintained. So when we talk about EVs, we're not talking about disrupting what people buy and sell. We're not looking at disrupting that economic activity or disrupting who they see, how they socialize. The disruption would come in how they mobilize to do that. So the disruption would be bringing in those EVs, new types of vehicles, configurations that would allow them to continue and even escalate positively those economic and social activities, but using sustainable and renewable types of transportation devices, solutions. So therein comes in the challenge, but we believe the excitement also. And this will call for unique, very innovative ideas that would come in and help those communities excel in what they already do, but in a new and sustainable manner.
So we heard already different aspects. I heard last mile solutions. We talked about mass and mobility as a service is an aspect. Now, the vehicle is not existing as an object as such itself. So we see all the connectivity points. So there is a data-driven model behind here. So the digitalization aspect, what data exchange there is, how important do you see this role and the transition going to this data-driven model? We can start with...
Yeah, brilliant. I'm glad you mentioned that, because our vehicles have been considered or claimed as a smartphone on wheels. So the three issues we address is the environment, of course, the profitability of aggregators, say, restaurateurs, operators in general, 3PLs, government, and then you look at the time and safety. So we've seen globally share prices of big aggregators have fallen because they're not focused on the rider welfare. Now with the data that we have and the data sets that we build in our vehicles, we can gamify, say, sustainability. We can look at the riding styles and behaviors of riders, reward them for riding safely, reducing the work pressure by optimizing routes. All of these sort of data sets allow us and to provide the governments with data so they can make policy changes and regulations based on fact. The riders are rewarded, they're earning more money globally. They can then offset or say as a family, if you have a e-bike, your wife or husband has another vehicle, you have something else, then as a family you can collectively unite those vehicles the same way you can with say Apple products, and then they communicate with each other. So again, we reward sustainability or a sustainable loyalty rewards program, say with HSBC, to offer that, and that would just be a scale up as well. So does that answer?
Yeah, perfect.
In part, but data is absolutely key. It's how you use that data. It's pointless having it and then not processing it. Everyone's talking about, you know, what big data, AI and so on, but unless you're processing it and using it for an advantage, it's absolutely redundant.
How do you handle the data?
I think like you said, I mean, sometimes it's just overrated. I mean, because you get a lot of data and you don't know what to do with it. So you want the right kind of data as well. So, I mean, apart from EVs, even just in ICE vehicles, we use IVMS systems, in-vehicle monitoring systems. So we kind of leverage the IoT technology on how to extract driver behavior details, you know, how much time the car idles, you know, how efficient is the fuel being used, you know, route optimization. We do all of that. So with EVs, I'm sure, you know, it can be one step forward. We already have the technology. We just need to use it in EVs. So I'm sure, yeah, even with EVs, we can you know, help clients improve their driving behavior.
Let's look to Michael as well. Data is also key for you.
Yeah, so adding on to what Adam had said, I wanted to say that it's very important to look at the data and how you process it to go back to the customers to make their lives easier. So other than doing smart mobility, one of the business core that we're doing is smart city and smart home. So the best thing that we could do with the data that we have, for example, if every day we're going simple things that are already there, if we're going every day from the office back home at, let's say, 5 o'clock in the evening or 6 o'clock in the evening, and you're going in your car, the car can start to talk to the smart poles, which already exists. This technology we are already developing, and you know, other competitors, they also make the same. The car will talk to the pole, and as you are getting closer and closer to the home, you know, the lights could turn on their own, the AC can turn on, the water heater could be on. So I'm trying to think about how could we utilize data to make the customer's life easier, but at the same time, look at it in a bigger picture. Look at their life. Don't just look at the electric vehicle at their time when they're using the car. In the end, all of the car is collecting data. Nowadays, appliances are also collecting data as well. Smart home, smart light, your light bulb is collecting data as well. If you only look at it as a singular picture, it might be difficult to process that into meaningful data. But when you look at it as on a broader and holistic picture, then I think that's going to be very meaningful to people's future.
So we heard already many aspects of this. Now we have somebody from government side sitting here. We are talking about alternative fleets that should be getting decarbonized and getting cleaner transport. From our organization, we think that electrification is one of the better options in terms of efficiency. Now, yeah, we see in Uber, we see Amazon bringing their own delivery products with electric vans, etc., etc. Should it be policy-driven or should it be industry-driven? which way is the best way to go, or where is the balance? Maybe we can start with you?
Yes. We in Nigeria are currently working on the electric vehicle development plan, a set of incentives, regulations that will drive electric vehicle development and most especially adoption and usage. Traditionally, our governments have been role models for the adoption and patronage of local industry especially. So as we develop this policy, within it would be rules and regulations that would make it easy for government agencies to patronize EVs, and then therein also make it easier for other bigger institutions to patronize and use electric vehicles. At the stage that we are, government involvement is crucial for development of electric vehicles and their usage in the country. So we're looking at a setup where agencies, we already have policies in Nigeria that dictate that MDAs, ministries, departments, and agencies of government at all levels use only vehicles that are assembled or produced in the country. So that we're looking at expanding it or focusing it on electric vehicles, where government focuses more on patronizing electric vehicles, and then it'll make it easier to build scale, and then those providers of those electric vehicles can then expand to the private sector.
Michael, how do you look at that? Policy-driven or industry-driven?
I think it really depends on the country, or it depends on the state of the economy. So if you're talking about countries like the UAE, like the United States, like you know, the European Union, it should be industry-driven, because most of these countries, most of the developed world, they're very you know, driven by innovation. You know, when new innovations come out, like for example, if you look at Uber, when Uber came out, there was no regulation to regulate that, and then the regulation followed the innovation. But if you're talking about the developing countries, the emerging countries like you know, Nigeria, once again Egypt, Indonesia, sometimes when you want to do more and more innovation, and the policy is not there, there's a big worry that the policy is not favorable to innovation. Therefore, it halts both entrepreneurs from developing something new, or for companies to bring in new innovation to the country. So, for example, I think it was around 5-6 years ago, hybrid cars, before there was a big craze, there was a big hype over the current EVs. Things like the Toyota Prius, for example, used to be valued 2 times more than regular cars, because government people in Indonesia used to consider that they have 2 engines. One is the battery, one is the engine itself, the gasoline engine, the combustion engine. So in that case, they had to pay twice as much as what they needed to pay for like a normal, for example, like a Camry, like a standard Camry. So I think, once again, to conclude, I think it's really important for developing countries to have full support from the government. But for developed countries, you know, let the entrepreneur push the industry forward.
Nipin, I also want to like to hear it from you. We can also give the example, like Norway, it's the front runner in electrification, but also by policy, it's decided from 2025 there is no possibility to sell any new internal combustion engine. As LeasePlan representative, would you be happy with this model, or you really prefer a business, industry-driven model?
Yeah, I mean, I would love UAE to be like Norway, to say 2025 it'll all be EVs, but it doesn't happen that way. I mean, there is obviously the perception that this is an oil economy, and that there shouldn't be a fast transition. But I don't think the government sees it this way. I mean, they're quite active. In fact, they're not waiting for the industry to push it forward. There's an active involvement from the government side as well. There's a lot of conversation going on. How can we improve the infrastructure and how can we increase the uptake? And I mean, for all the naysayers, I mean, who back the whole oil economy versus electrification, by 2030, if you want to like stick to the Paris Accords, you're going to see a 50% to achieve like a 50% reduction, in carbon emissions to ensure that you match it. You also must see that there will be a corresponding 70% increase in mobility. So how do we accommodate this increase in demand? There's always scope for increase in EVs. So the government understands this. So here, I think, more than industry, I think there should be a government participation as well, because UAE, unlike the United States, is still not there yet when it comes to being a mature market. It's still in the developing phase. So I think there should be a public-private partnership. So.
Yeah, based on what you said and what Michael said, it's all about collaboration. So yes, you absolutely have to have the innovation from the private sector that's welcomed by the public sector. But one thing that a lot of stakeholders in the industry don't necessarily appreciate is, as a founder, as an entrepreneur, you want everything to happen very quickly because you're agile, you're a business decision maker, you know the path. But then you also need to understand that the public sector, this behemoth in any government, even more so in sort of democratic environments, it just takes so long. It's this behemoth of a beast to try and move and navigate through. And if a government says something, they can't really afford to make these great big mistakes. If an entrepreneur, a founder, a startup, an innovator makes a mistake, you can move on to it within seconds or into another solution within seconds. So it's incredibly important to realize that the government can't, any government can't just back an idea that's said by a hungry entrepreneur and then roll it out. There's so many things to consider. So it is a private and public sector collaboration of where are the problems, how do they get identified, who are the key trusted players, and how to make that as inclusive as possible. So you're not necessarily inviting competition, but you need to have multiple players in the environment in order to make that difference.
You're talking about collaborations. Now, electric vehicles, they need also their energy supply. Also there we need to talk about collaborations on by preference, solar energy, wind energy, as long as the supply is clean, the cleaner your driven kilometers become. How important are these collaborations for you? Anyone wants to start with it?
Yes. For us, they're very important. We do have a challenge with electricity and power in Africa, I believe, generally. But we believe also that that is a challenge that can easily be solved with the right strategy. When we started to promote vehicle electrification in Nigeria, a lot of people thought we were crazy. But then we said, okay, now the challenge is electricity. So we said, yes, we do have that challenge, but I think it's something that we can very easily find a solution to. So our agency, NADDC, developed 100% solar-powered EV charging stations that we've commissioned and we're using to power the electric vehicles that have been assembled in Nigeria. There's a Hyundai Kona EV. So we've proven that through renewable energy anywhere on the planet, you can power electric vehicles and use it as a source of energy for that transportation solution across the country. We met here yesterday, a company actually from here, UAE, that is into solar-powered electric vehicle charging station systems. So we really do look forward to collaborating with such companies and others from around the world to further strengthen the use of renewable energy in powering electric vehicles in Nigeria.
Thank you. Who else wants to pick on this? We are in a very sunny region, so I would think automatically on collaborations with solar energy.
Yeah, I've been saying for years now that many industries were all very sort of predatory. You start up a business, you want to take as much business as possible, which I get. That's a very traditional mindset, whereas collaboration or a collaborative mindset is one that works. And for us, in terms of energy, we don't develop battery technology. We don't invest in battery tech because we know there's far better experts that are doing that. So we use that tech. It doesn't mean that we don't research and collaborate with our engineers, others, to find out exactly what the future is and sort of test the mindset of, is this innovative enough? But looking at solar, yes, you've got the infrastructure. Is the technology there to mass roll out? Is the landscape able to have all these, the panels and the tech, the dust in the air, the cleaning of those? There's a lot of idiosyncrasies with, say, solar, but yes, it is a viable option. Then we look at other energy sources that are just constantly progressing. So in 5 years, are we going to be using lithium batteries in our vehicles? I don't know. But it's collaborating with Michael, which I want to have a chat after this, but collaborating with companies that can offer that modularity and collectively innovate, then energy is incredibly important, but no one has the answer, I don't believe, of where that's going to come from, where that end solution is, because it should consistently evolve.
Michael?
Yeah, I think solar energy has gone down in terms of the cost of production for the last I would say, decade. If you talk about 10 years ago, when you talk about solar energy penetration, there's no way that any of this would be feasible because the technology was still new. Again, government was not pushing this renewable energy push before. But I think over the next 10 years, we'll see that solar energy will continue to go down in price in terms of the cost of production. Therefore, it would reflect accordingly to the customers, to the end customers. But one thing that we should be aware of is everything that needs to be proposed to the end customer, as far as renewable energy solutions or solar solutions, they have to be economically viable. So if there's no economic value there, and people are still, they still think that it's too expensive, the upfront cost is expensive, then I think we will fail in this renewable energy and EV transformation process. So I think this is then the role of COP26, COP27. I think this year is COP27 in Egypt. So I think it's important that countries continue to get together to make sure that collectively we're all moving towards this, because that's going to help. When the government supports it, there's more demand for it. The cost of production of solar goes down, and then perhaps the government will stop putting a subsidy on oil. Until today in Indonesia, oil is being subsidized, and every time they remove that subsidy, there's going to be like a demonstration going on, a protest over that. So in the end, sometimes it's not only about making sure that it's not subsidized anymore, but to not think about this politically as well. Sometimes people they don't want to remove the subsidy right before the elections because they want to be able to get on everybody's. They want to win people's hearts. So I think it's a collective collaboration together. If various different countries are signing agreements to make it happen, I think the transformation to solar energy would be perfect. Right now, even now as oil prices are going up, gas prices are going up, I think there's much more demand for solar energy. I hope that eventually people will lessen their subsidies, price ceilings. So in that case, people will be forced to adopt this way.
Good. Let's hear if we have questions from the audience here. Anyone has a specific question to one of our speakers here? No one? Yeah, go ahead. There is a microphone over there. So please announce who you are and which organization you represent.
Hi, I actually wear several hats. One of them is an advisor to a group of sovereign wealth funds. It's about 45 sovereign wealth funds looking to invest large amounts of money into the ownership of fleets, of transportation fleets, and the relevant electrification. My question is with respect to LeasePlan. And the question is this: whereas we're looking at investing in municipal buses under power purchase, like mobility purchase agreements, we call them transportation PSCs, all over the world, in certain countries the credit quality is not very good. And as a result, these are very often private sector fleets. For example, buses in Africa, right, are run privately as private sector entrepreneurial fleets. Would you ever consider partnerships to do leasing to those sorts of customer markets? There's a reason I'm saying this. We're hosting a big bus summit after the G7 in Munich, and we are bringing together all these sovereign wealth funds. And in every other part of the world, we've got high credit quality, so we can look at it as a yield instrument. But in Africa, most of these African countries, we need to see it as a leasing model to private entrepreneurs with their bus services. Is that something you'd look at?
I can't speak for the corporate approach on this, but I'll tell you from my experience. So LeasePlan is governed, in Netherlands, it's actually a bank. Because of the size of, how big we are, we're actually monitored by the European Central Bank. So our credit checks here as well, locally, although we are in a JV, is like pretty stringent. We still follow the same European guidelines of credit checks, and everything works just like a bank. We are not fully a bank. We are far more agile. We're somewhere in between. It's kind of niche. So when it comes to markets which have low credit quality, I think it will be a challenge. I think that's my...
Very good question, of course.
Can I just
very
jump
good
in on
question.
that? I know you didn't ask me a question, but one thing that's really I find quite important and interesting here is you have the manufacturers, and then you have your third-party logistics. They're usually the fleet operators or the asset owners, and then you'll have the sort of second tier where they may possibly lease out to smaller 3PLs, and then the aggregators will lease or have a contract with those 3PLs. So you've got so many different layers that when you have not to jump in on LeasePlan, but when you have a lease provider, there's a margin. Then when you offer that to operators, say in Africa, the private operators, then yes, they're going to be able to expand their fleet, expand their businesses by leasing, but you've got that extra layer of margin. And you know that if you own the EV, the cost of operation, say servicing, maintenance and fuel, the big costs, if you own that asset, your return on investment is going to be a lot faster than if you lease that asset. So I think from a leasing model, it might need to be a reducing leasing option over time to then make that extra layer potentially offer greater yields. Over here, we lease direct from, we sell direct to leasers to grow the market, not just in this part of the world, but that's our model, reducing the amount of people in the mix.
It's indeed an excellent question, and I've seen also a business developed specialized in leasing electric vehicles. So with all respect from LeasePlan, of course, but you see that also there's a different business model upcoming, and not surprisingly that will be the further developments on that.
Actually, there was a conversation that Nipin and I were having before this, and it was very much, if you speak the macroeconomics or the vocabulary of that gig worker, just in our sector, but if you can say to someone that for $3 a day they can own this vehicle, they know that if they're working for one of the food delivery aggregators, they're earning $2 per delivery. All they need to do is do 2 deliveries, they're in profit. And same with the boda riders in Africa, we're doing exactly the same model. Show and speak to them on how affordable it is to have an EV, quashing the objections and the uncertainty through market education or vehicle knowledge. You're speaking to them on that macroeconomic level, which increases the uptake. So from a fund, or we've got a vehicle investment trust that is basically offering that, similar to a real estate investment trust, where that allows the end users, whether it's an individual or a small or even a large fleet operator, to really work out what their return on that investment is.
Any other questions? No? Then maybe just one small sentence. We are here for the first time on the Electric Vehicle Innovation Summit in Abu Dhabi. What's your takeaway? One sentence. Starting Michael. And he's...
No, I hear you.
Yeah?
I hear you.
Give me a minute.
I'm very enthusiastic to see that there's so many industry leaders looking at so many different models, especially the car sharing model. I would not have thought that the car sharing model would be something that crossed my mind. One of the big reasons is that when you're looking at a developing country, sometimes, and this happens quite often. I know you said one sentence, but let me just quickly just say one thing, which is that sometimes.
Are you hijacking now?
Could you? Are you guys able to hear me there?
No, you're hijacking now the question, but go ahead.
Okay, no, I'm just saying that sometimes people will steal these scooters that you find in JBR, for example. If you bring them to some developing countries, they might steal it, bring them home. Sometimes they might even melt it, to make it into metal, for example. So I'm thinking of that sometimes when I think about a sharing model, but I really am enthusiastic about it, and I really hope that there are enough control mechanisms for that future, so that there are more people who have access to vehicle access, not ownership, but access to vehicles.
It's of course a tricky question towards you because you're not present here, but Jelani, your takeaway from here, being here present?
Yes, I'm really very excited to see all these great companies and innovations here in electric vehicles. I'm really very happy for humanity. And I believe that Nigeria and Africa present a great destination for the application of these EV solutions.
Thank you. You?
Me? Okay.
You can follow.
I think the timing of it is perfect. I mean, with COP28 coming, I think there's a lot of conversation around EVs and sustainable vehicles, and the buzz here is fantastic. I didn't expect so much of traction, but I can see there's a lot of like-minded peers and professionals. So, kudos to the organizers.
I can share that. Adam, for you.
Yeah, I was invited as part of a UAE delegation to London a couple of days ago, and I was on stage, and I said that we've got one mission, and that's to electrify all last-mile vehicles in the UAE by 2024, or showing that the UAE take action before COP28. And I also said, I haven't got a clue how I'm going to do it, but we will. And just from coming here, literally yesterday, so here today, to look around and see there's so many, it's a much grander event than I thought it was going to be, meeting a lot more stakeholders than you currently usually have access to from various different points. So EVIS, absolutely needed. It's fantastic to see how many people are actually trying to bring change as opposed to letting it or waiting it to happen. So very, very impressed and really empowered to see what's going to happen in the future.
Thank you. Kind words for the audience, kind words for the speakers. So let's finish this last tech session for today. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening.